Guys, let me introduce to you our new speaker. He's Walter Reade. He works at Kaggle as a data scientist. He helps companies to transfer their data into competitions we can all participate in. Walter received his PhD in chemical engineering from Penn State University, and all his great problem-solving skills from working at Kimberly-Clark. Walter is best known for becoming the first ever Kaggle discussion Grandmaster. So, if you have any questions for him, as you can see, he's not here physically, so any question you have, you can post on general channel on Slack, and Walter will answer it. So guys, welcome the first ever Kaggle discussion Grandmaster, Walter Reade.
Okay, just a sound check. Let's see, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Thumbs up, okay. Well, good evening, Dzień dobry, Janki. It's great to be speaking here. I really wish I could have attended in person. So as the introduction says, I've been a long-time Kaggler. I was an active competitor for 5 years. Now, what's funny about that is I didn't become the first competitions Grandmaster. I became the first discussion Grandmaster, which kind of indicates I spent most of that 5 years on the forums rather than competing, but that's okay. So now working for Kaggle, it's just absolutely fun to be able to deliver competitions. I have a new appreciation for the amount of work that goes into making these great competitions. The late nights to try to ensure that there's no leakage, but I still have a lot of fun, although I do miss sometimes actually being in the competition. It is fun both to see so many long-term Kagglers continuing to do well. It's also really fun to see so many new people coming in. So today I'm not going to be very technical in what I share, but I do want to share some things that if you've been around for a while, maybe you just haven't explored. If you're new, maybe you haven't seen this. But here's some things that I think it's really worthwhile for you to check out. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's do that. Okay. Now let's see. I'm assuming everyone can see this. If there's a problem, just hit me up in the Slack channel. But since about a year ago, Kaggle started working on what's called Kaggle Learn. So if you go to kaggle.com/learn, and we've developed, I think, an impressive getting started guide and tutorials on machine learning, pandas, data visualization, SQL, R, and deep learning. Now, you know, this is a great place. I highly recommend. So one of the challenges for me is when I was first getting started there was so much to learn. It was very difficult for me to keep track of what did I need to learn, what was the next thing. So we've tried to make it a little bit easy. So if you, for example, drill down on the machine learning, you can keep a self-paced kind of checklist of what you've done. You can see we have very simple how models work, starting an ML project, all the way down now, starting to get a little more advanced, cross-validation, data leakage. Sometimes I should probably check this out. But it's really a nice way for people who are especially new to get started and to, you know, have what, like if you follow this, it's probably a good pathway forward. And, maybe if you're advanced, maybe there's still some things in data visualization, for example, with Seaborn or Plotly. So I highly recommend that you check out Kaggle Learn if you have not already. So the next topic, I want to talk about, these all kind of chain together, but they're slightly different. And before I forget, we're constantly adding features. So you'll notice right here, there's these site notifications. That's kind of a new addition. So if you have made a forum post, or if somebody has commented on your forum post, you'll get this site notification, which makes it a little bit easier. I don't know about you, but I tend to subscribe to a lot of the forums, and it's hard to keep up, but this helps a little bit. I will show you actually another thing that we recently did, in case you noticed it. We're doing a better job marking both the Kaggle team, the original poster for the topic, and as well as if it's a competition host admin. So it makes it easier to see who's replying to what. All right. So the next thing I wanted to say is, when I started Kaggle, we didn't have anything. We didn't have scripts or kernels, and then we had scripts, and they were a little bit limited and flaky. And anyone who's been with Kaggle for a number of years has seen that there's been incredible growth, both in the functionality as well as the power. And the most recent addition is the addition of GPUs. Now, right, again, if you're a professional, you probably have access to faster GPUs. But for a lot of people getting started, using a Kaggle kernel with a GPU might be just what you need, especially right with some of those maybe starter competitions or playground competitions. So I would highly, if you have not tried it, try to start up a kernel. And this script that Dan Becker did, running Kaggle kernels with a GPU, is the best way to get started. And it's only been around for a little bit. So now let me talk about some really kind of exciting changes. I was fortunate about 3 years ago. I was talking with Ben Hamner. He was looking to talk with some community members about their vision and their pathway. And I had a phone conversation with Ben, and one of the largest pieces of that was what tools do you need for people to collaborate? Now, me personally, the first few Kaggle competitions I did, I just did by myself, right? I was a solo competitor. And then I started working, with another person. And that person was in Australia. So, it was keeping things synchronized and, making sure we weren't overlapping. And then I had a team that was 10 people, and that was extremely difficult, keeping, right, just the tasks and making sure, if somebody updated a library. One of the things Kaggle has been doing is trying to make it much easier for teams of people to work together on a data science project. And if you remember when Kaggle first started scripts and kernels, they were all public. Well, we've added the ability to make them private, and now they're private by default. So anytime you create a new kernel, it's private, which is really nice. Most people do not want their draft work exposed to the world, especially if they have issues with it. So making kernels private, we saw that the adoption of kernels increased significantly. You may not be aware, a recent change, if you go to your kernel and click option, you can now add individual people to that kernel. So add Will. Okay, so you as the owner of this kernel can add Will as a viewer or an editor. And I think it's okay if Will edits this. And you can add as many people as you want, and you can save this. So now if you have 2 people working on a competition, you may have independent kernels. You may decide that you want to share this with one collaborator. So again, just moving towards that ability to use Kaggle to work together. And this is particularly useful when if you have a team now in a competition, you can theoretically do all your work within kernels and share that so only your team members can see that. Similarly, we have the same thing. So if you haven't done a data set, I know a lot of people have not ever created a data set, but you can take a data set, upload it to Kaggle, and same with kernels, you can have that public or private. We've also added that same functionality to to kernels. Now, in this case, it's public, but what if I wanted to add will be able to edit this as well, right? So now again, imagine you had two people brand new to data science. They wanted to work together. They only had their laptops. They didn't have access to a workstation. They could use Kaggle to do all the computational power. If they had, maybe they wanted to save their submission files to Datasets so they could stack an ensemble. You can do that all within Kaggle and make it all private, only to competitors. So Datasets, again, is one of those things that if you haven't tried it, I recommend you look into it. Now, the other thing that's nice about Datasets is, so you can see here a little while ago, I uploaded the leaderboard data for the Talking Data ad fraud competition. The reason being I wanted to create a visualization. So when you do that, you also can modify and add descriptors to your column metadata, but it also has a very nice data explorer. So if you have a data set, you can very nicely see what the distributions look like. Just as an FYI, we are building out a version 2 of this, and unfortunately, I don't have a preview of it, but just to give you a teaser that the engineering team has putting a lot more functionality into that data visualization, so that you can see the number of missing values, outliers, and whatnot. So keep an eye out for that. You may have noticed if you go to, let's see, let me go to a competition. Let me go to this home credit risk competition. You may have noticed that if you go, for example, to the data page, all of a sudden this thing came out of nowhere, right? So for a few months now, Kaggle has had an official API that allows you to do a number of things. Now, there's a lot of information there, so I'm not going to go through it all, but I do recommend that you check out the GitHub Kaggle API page, and that has quite a lot of very detailed description about what it can do, what you have to do in order to get your credentials working, the commands, and again, I think one of the most common is downloading the data and making a submission. So simplifies significantly, if you're working on a workstation somewhere in SSHN and you run your model, and you can write scripts that do all of this stuff automatically. So this is quite a lot of work in the last few months, and I think it's seen some rapid usage. And if you haven't used it, I recommend it. So the last thing I'll say, and I know I have more time, but again, being this video, I don't want to have this be too dense with information. There was a question that was asked not too long ago, and let me go back and stop sharing and go back here. Is Kaggle running out of competitions? I remember that question was asked 4 years ago. I remember that question was asked 3 years ago, 2 years ago. What's absolutely fantastic is Kaggle is not running out of competitions. In fact, just the opposite. When Kaggle was acquired by Google, all of a sudden the number of companies that wanted to host competitions increased. So even though we have ebbs and flows in how many competitions we launch, and sometimes seems like we're just launching image competitions or research competitions. There is a very long pipeline of every type of competition that you can imagine, NLP, tabular data, image recognition, both object recognition as well as masking or localization. So, if you see something, or if it's been a couple of months and you haven't seen the competition you're looking for, there's a very high probability that will, within the next couple of months, they'll have one. With that, we actually have worked very hard and strategically to try to have a featured competition pipeline that is approachable for people that are both highly skilled as well as people who are moderately skilled. We always want our featured competitions to people to be accessible to people who don't have supercomputers, don't have GPU clusters, don't have 64 core VMs, and we just launched one yesterday, Home Credit, which is kind of small data, right? I think less than a gigabyte of data. So that's a competition that anyone can do on their laptop or with Kaggle kernels. So with that, I'm going to look at the Slack, and I saw a question. So the question was, will code competitions become more popular? I think it is a great idea and companies should use it more. Yes, absolutely. Anthony will talk more about this in his talk later this afternoon, but there are so many advantages to code competitions. First and foremost, there's the ability to, monster ensembles sometimes are fun, sometimes they can be very boring, and we all know that no one puts a monster ensemble into production. So code competitions, make you be more creative within constraints. It also allows us to have other advantages of potentially not releasing the test set, right? So sometimes we have competitor hosts that have smaller data, and theoretically, if it's only 2,000 images in the test set, it can be hand labeled. So this allows us to run potentially smaller test sets. The constraint has always been engineering, and we are working hard on that. We do expect to have a major code competition, kernels only competition launch this year, but that's all I'll say about that. So any other questions? What does Kaggle think about using Kaggle kernels for tasks outside of competitions? For example, if I don't have R installed, but I need to check something quickly. It's very convenient or for better reproducibility. We absolutely 100% support that. I do it. Well, of course, I'm employed by Kaggle, but I do it if I weren't employed by Kaggle. Kernels will continue to both be more accessible, have more power. We will, in the future, have more options for people that want those monster VMs linked to kernels. You probably know Datasets has BigQuery integration. So feel free to use kernels for whatever you want. That's great. School project, would love to see people using them for school projects. Okay. Other questions? How many people thought I was 20 years younger based on my old Kaggle profile than my real life? I actually met a Kaggler that from his Kaggle profile picture. I'm like, oh, you took that 20 years ago too, didn't you? He's like, yeah. But okay, we've got one more question coming in. Oh, thank you. Great question. Does Kaggle have anything in the pipeline to tackle good kernels which are very late in competition? Yes. That, you know, originally that was every once in a while, and that happened, and okay, maybe people will just learn. And recently there was an instance, it was not only just that it was a good kernel, but it was a good kernel that was stacked on top of a good solution. It's one thing that if somebody posts a code that takes 3 days to run, a day before the competition, but it's another thing that if somebody posts. So we're exploring a number of options. There's pluses and minuses to each of them, right? In a real world. So we're being very thoughtful about that. But yes, we will definitely take some countermeasures to reduce the amount of last minute actions that can really spoil the competition for people, while at the same time trying to ensure that we don't shut down collaboration. Because you're right, my experience, I think most people's experience is we learn so much from kernels, we learn so much from people's creativity. It just really, really is suboptimal to wake up and see that you've dropped 500 places and everyone has the same score that is above you. So yeah, great question. I don't have a timeline on that because depending if there's engineering changes or whatnot, but we're having those discussions and we'll continue to press on that. And by the way, I hope the impression is we care very much about your direct feedback, and so please post, obviously respectfully, but say what you feel and chime in. And I hope you have that feeling that we really do care. I think most of the forum, if not all, get seen and get passed on. So thank you for that. Continue to do that. We do listen. Does Kaggle plan to publish more competitions for greater good? Yes, absolutely. Sometimes that's tricky for a competition. The reason is oftentimes this data is already public. So it's not necessarily non-trivial to make it into a competition with prizes, or even, when the data is public. But I think there's enough need that's on our radar. We've done a few. We'll continue to do that. At a minimum, data sets and maybe some playground competitions, maybe some competitions that are just Kaggle t-shirts and whatnot. But yes, absolutely. And do you think the reinforcement learning competition is possible on Kaggle? I love Santa, want to host a wide variety of competitions. Yeah, Anthony will talk more about our future. We want to both be, that pipeline of Kaggle competitions should include, basic to hard, difficult, but also kind of cutting edge, like reinforcement learning. We know there's a lot of interest in that. And so, yeah, you can expect that. In fact, Anthony should talk about some resources that we've hired to help us better execute those things. All right. Oh, 5 or 6 months. Oh, that's a great question. We have a lot of flexibility with how long we can do the competitions, and typically, I don't know. So typically a sponsor or the host is eager to see the results, so we make it as long as possible where we think it's reasonable. But yeah, for some of the more cutting edge researchy ones, there's no reason why we could. But I don't have a good answer why there aren't more that are that long. So yeah, I'm going to pass that along to the team and just try to get more information. Would Kaggle consider application-specific chatbot, autonomous driving, or translation? I think so. There's the one that is the CVPR one that's kind of geared towards autonomous driving. I think we'll definitely continue to see competitions, especially in the hot areas. Chatbot, you know, we recently had the Jigsaw competition, which was the toxic labels. We're working on another labeling one. I don't think those will go away. And the chatbot, that's kind of an interesting one. If you saw the Google I/O presentations about the Google Duplex, the AI that can call and schedule a haircut, it would not be surprising to me if we had that team, right, host a Kaggle competition. There is one that is application specific for an object recognition app that will be coming out later this year, but I can't share those details. So I think we will see, you know, in the coming year more than we usually have, and that will increase over time. The translation one is really, really neat too. You know, that work is just growing and exploding. I think, this is a guess on my part, we'll probably see more that are geared towards machine learning fairness. How do we, you know, train models that, you know, don't have the, you know, the human biases that are often in our data? I would expect we see more of those. We're always open for suggestions, and, you know, if you know of people that have data sets, send them our way. All right. Well, I'm about out of time, and I actually have to pack up and head to an airport, head home, and then I'll be in Seattle next week. But what a great group, and I hope the rest of your Kaggle days goes well.
So yeah, thank you, Walter, for your presentation and answering all the questions. So thanks and goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.